back to the Early Weigh-In podcast. Headed to New York this week. We got UFC Long Island. It's headlined by top 5 featherweights. We got Brian Ortega taking on Yair Rodriguez. No doubt this fight should absolutely be a banger. And then in the co-main event, not really my first choice of fights, but we got top 15 women's strawweights. Michelle Waterson taking on Amanda Lemos. Throughout the card, 12 fights on the books. Some really exciting fights to get into. We're back in a live crowd, which always seems to produce more finishes. And I personally think, man, that there are so many live underdogs on this card. Can't wait to get into it. Last week was UFC Vegas 58, Rafael versus Rafael. We've seen Fiziev get that finish early in round 5. We both did hit our best bets last week, but came out with some very small losses. Easy to get back on track. But before we get into these breakdowns, go ahead and go through some of the bets we made last week.
Yeah, man. Like you said, the best bets were on point. You hit Said Nurmagomedov for 3 units. That really helped you out. It was the Ricky Tercios bet, which I think everybody who had money on him was regretting. Just didn't really show up to fight that night at all. You parlayed Nurmagomedov and Caio Borralho to win at minus 107. Excellent parlay. Then you ended up the night minus 0.86 units. Like you said, minimal loss and definitely easy to come back from. Looking at my card, I had 1.5 units on Caio. Again, that was probably our best bet of the night. The Michael Johnson versus Jamie Malarkey, I'm a little upset right there. I do think that Michael Johnson should have gotten the nod, but it is what it is. And then Rafael Fiziev, the main event, not to go to the judges. We were both on that fight, and it did get a little bit sketchy. Took till round 5, but it did hit, and that plus money, I'd make that bet all over again. I ended up the night minus 0.36 units. Again, minimal loss, and we'll look to come back from it. In our main event, we have 2 featherweights in Brian Ortega and Yair Rodriguez. Coming into this fight, I really wanted to play Ortega. Yair has been someone I haven't had much trust in his entire career. Whether it's like the matchups that he's getting or that Frankie Edgar beatdown that he took. He kind of always struck me as a one-dimensional fighter. But after seeing his last performance against Max and considering his age, I do think that he could be a legitimate title contender in the future. Ortega, on the other hand, kind of concerning in his last few fights. The damage that he's taken, obviously it hasn't really caught up to him yet, but those are the type of beatings that he's going to have to avoid in the future if he wants to be a title contender again. I actually had high hopes for Ortega coming into his last fight with Volkanovski. He looked so much more improved in the stand-up off of his 2-year layoff when he fought the Korean Zombie. I really had high hopes for him. And I think that even though he took a beating in that fight with Volkanovski, he made it clear that he's dangerous at all times, threatening with that guillotine in the 3rd round. In this matchup, I don't really think Ortega's going to be able to have the wrestling to get the fight to the mat. Not only does he not have the offensive wrestling to get it down, I also think that he's going to have difficulties with this being a bigger octagon, Yair being able to use his footwork and movement. And, for what it's worth, Yair has been training at Izzy-style wrestling. Names like Showtime Pettis and Cerrone, not necessarily cream of the crop wrestlers, but, it is somebody I like to see him training specifically on wrestling. When it comes down to striking, I do think that Yair will find success with those wild kicks and strikes that he throws. Ortega's head movement, not that great. I think those strikes will land heavy in the judge's mind. And, this fight, I think, sees the scorecards around 50%. And I think Yair would get the nod for those reasons. With the freedom to dance, getting off the cleaner shots, and the defensive wrestling, I do think that Yair's money line is the play. There was an Ortega subline that opened up at plus 470. I think everybody in the world wishes that they would have gotten that line, but
like a Paul Craig, so right.
Exactly. Neither one of us got it, and it's moved down into the 200s. I like the Yair money line for sure. When the other books open it up, I do think that Ortega by sub could be a hedge, but as of right now, I think that there's plenty of value on Yair.
So I think we're going to see this fight pretty much the same. Ortega, to me, man, just in a real tricky spot. He's challenged for the belt twice against 2 different contenders who a lot of people consider, the best of the division. And like you said, while he had his moments in both of them, he got beat up badly in both of those. Doctor stoppage in one of them, and now he's at the point where, what he had to do what Max did, or he has to go beat these top 5 contenders a couple in a row before he gets his title shot. And I personally don't know if I have the faith in Ortega to do so. I love that represents Gracie Jiu-Jitsu and all, but as far as his skill set, I really just haven't been the highest on him. On his title run, he's down in round 3 to both Guida and Moicano before getting the submissions. And then his next 3 wins to the title path are, Cub Swanson, Frankie Edgar, and Korean Zombie, who are all 3 past their prime, in my opinion. And while you talked about it in his return, definitely showed better tendencies on the feet, just an overall better striking game. I think he loses majority of the minutes that he spends in range with Yair Rodriguez, and it to me should 100% look to mix in the takedowns, kind of the way Max Holloway did later in the fights, because on the feet, Yair, massive speed advantage with the strikes. He's going to put out twice the volume. And early on in that fight, in rounds 1 and 2, Yair was still in rounds. Man, Max was struggling very heavily with the calf kick and made the adjustments in rounds 3, 4, and 5 to mix in those takedowns and put Yair on that back foot. I just don't know if Brian Ortega has that pressure and the ability to do so. So the outcome in this fight, in my opinion, is solely up to Brian Ortega. Will he have the forward pressure to negate these kicks? Will he mix in the wrestling? If he does, he could come out looking like a favorite in hindsight, but the longer he spends at striking range, thinking he is some striker that's improved out of the octagon over these 2 years, I think Yair is very, very live in this spot. So the way I cap it, Ortega's only about a minus 120 favorite here or something like that. I think if you're looking for value on a money line, it's 100% on Yair all day. Personally, I'm looking at a prop here to play this fight instead of a money line. I think both are historically durable, and I think we see this fight, like you said, hit the scorecards at a pretty decent clip. In our co-main event of the evening, we got Michelle Waterson, Karate Hottie, taking on Amanda Lemos. And yeah, man, whoever's making this bout order needs to be released from their job. I could pick so many better co-main events for this spot. To me, it kind of seems like they're wanting to get, Amanda Lemos, their nice hot prospect who was finishing girls in round 1s, trying to get her back on track. She had the minor setback against Andrade, and now they're trying to get that veteran on her resume, get her back on track for a title. I think Tapology has it at 125. Marcel has it at 115. So something to keep an eye on this week. But if it is at 125, I think that's only going to play into Amanda Lemos having a bit of more strength advantage, not having to cut the weight and everything. So to Waterson, man, to her defense, she hasn't really looked the best of her form lately, but a lot of her losses throughout her career come to the cream of the crop of the division. But losing, 3 of her last 4, getting up there in age, I'm not necessarily eager to back her as an underdog here. But for the most part, she does like to keep that range. She does have the big octagon, and she keeps herself out of danger with the the push kicks and karate style that she has. And she seems like an expert at just taking these fights to the judges' scorecards. And I go back to the Marina Rodriguez fight where she's just getting pieced up on the feet, and she's tough enough to still relentlessly go for those takedowns and win round 4, spinning it on top of Rodriguez. So, I could see her hurt in this fight, but I've also seen her, gut through some of that and extend these fights. And she hasn't had to finish in almost 6 years. So I think if you're going to take a shot on Karate Hottie, you got to hope that she gets some type of split decision here after taking over late. But for Lemos, man, you see her coming off the Andrade loss, and you go back and watch that fight, and she is clearly getting the better of Andrade the entire first 2 minutes of that fight until leading up to the standing arm triangle, winning all the striking exchanges, the calf kick. She throws the teep kick up top, which is just nasty. And I don't know, man. While Karate Hottie might have the little slight volume edge, she whiffs at air majority of the time. And what shows on the judges' scorecards more is that power. And I think that's what's going to be coming from Lemos. You do see the Angela Hill, Mizuki Inu fights where she kind of slows down a little bit in round 3, can get grinded up against the cage. But I don't know, man. I don't have too much faith in Michelle here. I expected her to be real hesitant toward that power and everything coming back. So I'm going to go with Amanda Lemos as the big favorite.
Yeah, so I feel like it's a pretty common way to look at this fight that Lemos is going to win these first 2 rounds, Michelle coming in later on. But I tend to think that we're going to see a finish here, man. I looked down the record of Waterson, and I was shocked. 11 UFC fights, 3 of her last 4, probably 4 of her last 4 should have been losses. And then I dig a little bit deeper, and I think that Van Zandt really might be her crowning achievement of her UFC career, man. I look at the way Waterson is losing those bouts. Like you said, they come against top level of competition. But she's never really faced a finisher since her fight with Rose Namajunas, where she did get choked out. Losses to Tisha Torres, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, Carla Esparza, and Rodriguez. And, you might say Rodriguez kind of a finisher, that Amanda Ribas finish, because that was definitely my first thought when I looked at it. But nope, in 9 UFC fights, 8 of them have gone to decision. And, so then I kind of look at who the UFC might be setting up for this fight. And I do think that, they really were trying to make a push for Lemos. Andrade put that to a screeching halt. But even in that loss, the style that she brings is far more beneficial to the UFC than the point fighting style of Karate Hottie. Amanda, she has had 7 fights in the UFC, 5 of them ending inside the distance. And generally speaking, she's one of these kill or be killed type of fighters. For that first 7 minutes, I think, you're going to have to be able to withstand the physicality and the power shots of Lemos. And I'm not really sure that I can bank on a 36-year-old mother who's hinted at retirement and is going to be able to dig deep in those situations. Lemos, still hungry, and I have to imagine that she's like ready to get back in there, create some damage. She's not much younger than the Karate Hottie, but I think that she's definitely at a different stage in her career than Michelle Waterson. So the money line, it doesn't leave you much value at 3.5 to 1, but getting Lemos inside the distance at plus 200 or more seems like the best value on the fight. I think she gets it done early, but I do think that she has the power to get it done at any point in the fight. For my fight of the night, I'm going with Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. Absolute banger of a fight. We knew that one of us were going to pick this fight. I feel like we're put in a similar spot here with when Burgos fought Billy Q. He's sitting around a minus 200. Out of 100 fights that he's definitely the right side to be on. But damn, if there's not a ton of red flags with his fight style, I don't think that I can be convinced that there's much value on him winning at more than 63, 65% clip here. Both guys bring a ton of pressure when they fight and honestly have very similar plans whenever they come inside the octagon. I see what Sean Shelby's doing here. It's guaranteed fireworks. I really want to play the fight doesn't go to decision. It's sitting at plus money, and stylistically, I think we're in for like a Gaethje Chandler level of intensity in this matchup. That one was juiced to like minus 265, and we were putting it in parlays and everything else. But this one at plus money, it's like I'm fine with losing that bet even if it does go to decision. Like, I imagine both these guys get dropped multiple times. They're setting a pace where if you run this fight 10 times, I'm thinking it's not seeing the judges' scorecards at 70% or more. The prop lines haven't come out for this fight, but I do think that fight by submission is a real possibility. If it is some ridiculous number, I'm definitely going to have to take a stab at it. I see one of these two guys getting clipped, looking to clinch up. Burgos has that sneaky submission game that people tend to glance over. He submitted, I forget who it was, one guy in the UFC, he submitted Bill Algeo on the regional scene. And then, we just saw Jourdain's sneaky submission game with Lando Venata in his last fight. Both these guys are super hittable. I think that submission line is going to get glanced over big time, and the fight doesn't go to decision is something that I'm definitely looking to play.
Yeah, 100% fight of the night, possibly fight of the year written all over it, But you talk about it, it's like when you look back at Burgos' fights with Billy Q, with Edson, with Josh Emmett, and I know Edson finishes in round 3, but, you're holding a plus money doesn't go the distance ticket in any of those fights, and you lose, you make it all over again, right, man, and I expect this fight with Jourdain just to be as crazy as all the other ones I mentioned. For me, man, I'm pretty high on Burgos here, I'll be honest with you. I think the slugfest that it brings, who do I have confidence more in? I think it is going to be Shane. I think while he may not have the speed advantage, maybe the footwork advantage, I think when it comes to fundamental boxing, I'm going to give that to Shane. I'm going to give the volume a little bit to Shane. Definitely the pressure, man. I think he's going to be walking him down. And, when you're getting submitted by Julian Erosa in round 3s, I've seen Shane's gas tank repeatedly in round 3 not be a worry for me. And so compared to the Billy Q fight, I think it's going to be stylistically the same. I think Burgos is just going to be a bit sharper everywhere. He's going to be touching Jourdain every single time he steps forward, and it's just going to be how tough is Charles Jourdain. Is he going to be able to survive the full time? My concern for him, for Burgos is always the striking defense. It's basically non-existent, and the Edson moment is the scariest moment in MMA for me, much worse than his knockout of Terry Edom. I did not like the delay reaction, and I don't see the type of power coming back from Jourdain. I don't think he has the power of Cater. I don't think he has the power of Edson. I don't think he has the power of Emmett. And I even thought Lando Venata was really looking good until he got caught with the guillotine, landing the strikes on the feet, had a big takedown on him. And just been one of the guys that's never really been too high on Jourdain's skill set. While you can get in wars with Kulabau, with Rojo, who's a bantamweight, Julian Erosa, you can walk with your hands down to Andre Ewell, who's now cut in the UFC. I think Burgos is just an absolute different animal. I did get on him at minus 200, which is about the 70% clip. And for a guy who takes so much damage and just is in no style of fights, it is a bit of concern. But a lot of money has come in on Jourdain. You see Shane down at minus 165 on some books. So it's something that I might even have to look at. It's a confident read. I'm getting even better line. I might even look to double down. But Shane is there to be hit, and it's always going to be a concern backing him. For my fight of the night, I'm going to take Ricky Simón versus Jack Shore, and damn, another example of why whoever makes the bout order needs to be fired, man. That first off needs to be in London card next week with Jack Shore, but it's not, and should absolutely be on the main card here. We've got two guys, two of the better prospects at 135, really trying to crack their way into the top 10. Simón is an absolute workhorse in the octagon like no other. The dude's cardio just seems to be on another level, can consistently shoot these takedowns. He averages more than 6.5 takedowns landed per 15 minutes. I think he's going to have a bit of a speed advantage here as well, being a little bit smaller guy. And, since Uriah Faber fight, he does seem to be a little bit more improved. He seems to be sticking to what he knows best and sticking to his wrestling. But it is a bit of a concern to see him knocked out by a guy on the, 40 years old borderline retirement. Jack Shore, dude's been my dude since day one. I've backed this guy in some way or form every single UFC fight so far. Dude's 27. I think the sky is the limit for Jack Shore, and I think he's going to be around in the bantamweight division for a long time. Jiu-jitsu is incredible. Once it gets you on top of you, I think he has a much more controlling style than Ricky Simón does. He's much better submission fighter. He's really good at working his way to the back and getting the rear naked choke. And then last time against Timur Valiev, you saw the striking was really improving, dropping him a couple times in round 3. But there was also some competitive grappling moments with Timur Valiev and Hunter Azur that's telling me not necessarily fade my boy Jack Shore on Saturday, but keeping me off his money line and making me think this fight's going to be a little bit closer than I like it to be. I want some action on him, so I might try to find a prop, but I think this fight's a pick'em, man. I hate to say it, but Shore probably shouldn't be this much of a favorite here. To get a dominating wrestler like Simón at plus money, it's always tempting, man.
Yeah, they're saying that this fight sees the judges at minus 200, and I kind of agree with it. I do think that Ricky Simón is the side here, though, man. As far as the money line's concerned, I do like him as a dog here. I think that this is definitely Jack Shore's biggest step up. Timur Valiev, he is upper echelon, but he's definitely not Ricky Simón. You talked about the Uriah Faber finish. First round knockouts, as fluky as as it gets, in my opinion. So I don't want to look too much into it. It's Ricky Simón's wins over guys like Merab Davishvili in 2018 that hold heavier weight to me. And I do think that this is a similar fight where it's just going to be a test of conditioning here. And I do think that I'm going to have to favor Ricky here in pure wrestling. I don't know. Like you said, Jack might have more of a controlling pace, but I do think that Ricky's not going to be able to get held down. He also has difficulties holding people down, so a lot of scrambles. I think that we're going to see a mixture of how judges are seeing this fight scored. Mm-hmm. So like you said, it's probably the best to stand off, but 50-50 fight, you got to go with the dog. For my fighter to watch, I'm taking Dustin Jacoby. Not somebody I was a huge fan of when he first entered the UFC. Just kind of wrote him off as another kickboxer trying to go to MMA to revamp his career. Kind of the same category as Carl Roberson last week. But he has strung together a pretty impressive win streak here. I see a lot of people on the Jung side this week. Seems to be like maybe the public dog. And so I'm hoping that Jacoby line continues to come down to pick'ems where I think it would be playable. I do think that he's going to be levels above Jung on the feet. I know Jung has looked great recently, but he's faced some pretty low IQ opponents. Kennedy just standing there in front of him like they're in a phone booth and letting him tee off on him. William Knight, I've said it over and over again. He's just a brute. Not much technique at all. His wrestling is very poor. And I don't think that Jacoby's that bad, honestly. You know, like he's fought big guys like Maxime Grishin and proven that he is able to hang with some of these bigger guys. And I don't think that he's going to be directly in front of Jung to shoot for those takedowns. You know, he's got the bigger octagon now. He's able to use that the footwork, and I think inevitably the Jung takedowns will come. But I do think that Jacoby's has the wrestling or the takedown defense and get up game that he will keep the majority of this fight on the feet. I'm waiting for the line to drop, like I said, but I do think that Jacoby's the side here.
So I come out on the other side of this one. You know, I did get Dong Jung plus 124 a couple weeks ago. Jacoby, to me, you know, first time in the UFC, he was a middleweight, fought a lot of middleweight in kickboxing. And MMA, to me, I think when he goes up against some true big light heavyweights like Dong Jung, I think he's going to see some trouble. You know, on the outside, he likes to play the calf kick game. When he closes distance, man, I think Jung's a sharper boxer. He's sharper on the inside with the elbows, things as well. And then, you know, Jacoby, literally, I don't think, he hasn't finished in the UFC, I think. But he just doesn't have the pop on his shots that I think Jung does. But I get it, man. You see Jung outstruck by Sam Alvey and Kata Sabragimov, and it is not very enticing to back him. But I think it's primarily a striking battle. And in a pick'ems fight, I did take the dog there. But add something?
Yeah, I got to, man. You know, Jacoby's never fought at middleweight in the UFC, I don't think. And are you saying in his first time around? Okay. And also, he's got 2 finishes in the UFC. You know, Justin Ledet and Darren Stewart, man.
Both cut.
Yeah, and middleweight Darren Stewart. But yes, I don't know, man. I've got Jacoby here. It's funny that it
is virtually a pick'em fight. I absolutely agree. For my fighter to watch, I'm going to go with Emily Ducote here, man. Making her UFC debut somewhat on a short notice. But Ducote's been a pretty good name on the regional scene for a while. She's fought plenty of girls that you've seen in the UFC and in big-name fights. Emily Whitmire, Kanako Murata, Juliana Lima, Danielle Taylor, and then Bellator champ Alima Leigh McFarland. She's kind of, you know, been on her grind lately. 5-1 in her last 6. You know, Ducote's been 5 rounds multiple times, and she's coming off back-to-back stoppage wins. You know, the one 3 weeks ago, it was not very impressive. The girl is 5'11". She is an atom weight. And then you even look at her highlight, you know, KO win over Danielle Taylor, a girl who's only 5 foot tall. So, to me, how many times have we seen people get viral knockouts and then come in as a big favorite? And I think that's kind of what we're seeing the line being influenced by. I think she's 100% the better striker, you know. She's got the bigger cage. She's going to be able to use her speed. She's 11 years younger, much faster. But to lay minus 140, minus 145 on a debutante who I think has shown me holes and potential to get out grappled, it's a little risky here. You know, Panay is definitely the bigger of the 2 girls. She likes to walk you down and pretty much just in her last 2 sell out for the grappling any way she can, whether it's just clinging onto you in the clinch, pulling guard, and every one of Ducote's losses come to issues with the grappling. And you know, while she's not anywhere near of a dominant wrestler as somebody like Kanako Murata, the fact that she's just selling out for that grappling lately means to me that I think she's going to have moments in this fight. And I want to back Ducote, but I'm not. But I do definitely think she's somebody to keep your eyes on this Saturday.
Yeah, I think whenever you sent me that you were picking Ducote, I was like happily surprised. I do think that she's in the spotlight here and definitely could produce and earn herself a real UFC contract. I don't know if did they officially sign her?
I think they have, yeah, but it's like a 3-week notice fight here.
Right, so, you know, Panay is a perfect girl to do it to, 39 years old. But
USADA suspended.
Like you said, the highlight reel knockout, you are paying juice on that. So it would be nice to see Ducote actually have some success. 28 years old, she definitely has the foundation of experience to build off of. So definitely a girl to pick. For my underdog, I'll be taking Lauren Murphy over Miesha Tate. The line dramatically dropped in favor of Miesha Tate recently. She's up to minus 225, so you're getting the comeback at plus 180 or more on Lauren Murphy now. This is a fight where, you know, honestly, I think it's 50-50. It's not in Miesha Tate's favor that it's down at 125. They are, you know, both older. Lauren Murphy actually 3 years older than Miesha Tate, which is kind of surprising to me. But this is another part where I do think that Lauren Murphy, although she's older in age, she's at a different stage in her career. You know, Miesha Tate, 1 foot out the door, trying to make this comeback. And I do think that the UFC's even pushing to have her be a title challenger. But I don't think that she has developed her game enough to be able to compete with the upper echelon of competition. You know, she lost to Ketlin Vieira last time. The Marion Renault fight looked great, but Marion Renault was older than Lauren Murphy here. Murphy's a very physical 125er, kind of offers very similar game plan to Miesha Tate. I think both of them are looking to get on top and get it to the ground. But if it does stay standing, I actually kind of favor Lauren Murphy here. Both old, both kind of, you know, not somebody I want to put my money behind, but I do think that Lauren Murphy sitting at this price has exceptional value. So I might even lay a unit on her, but I do think that she's a great underdog.
Yeah, so reason for the line movement, dropped $1 million on Miesha Tate last night. Now, I got one unit on Miesha Tate at minus 170, like 20 minutes before you texted me about the live movement. You know, she looks in incredible shape, much better shape than she was even when she was the champion at 135. I personally don't think the cut to 125 is going to be an issue for her. She wouldn't be doing it, in my opinion, if she thinks it would. You know, you really go back and watch her fight with Joanne Wood and Lauren Murphy, and she might have lost that fight, and she had little to no success getting the fight to the mat. So I feel like the grappling edge is to Miesha. On the feet, I feel like it is close to a 50-50 fight, but I feel like Miesha Tate takes this fight at a pretty decent clip here. You know, whether this fight was 2 years ago, we know when Miesha Tate was very, very active. I think she's a big-time favorite here. It's just kind of the layoff and stuff that people are concerned about. But, you know, a loss over Ketlin Vieira, a big 135er who just went out and very competitive against Holly Holm. Mm-hmm. You know, I think Miesha Tate's actually going to be a good pick here on Saturday, man. Underdog for me, I think the card is just full of live underdogs. You can almost put a unit on all of them and come out positive here on Saturday. But I'm going to go with Dustin Stoltzfus. Very rarely do you get somebody who fights, you know, at the scheduled weight class with the perceived grappling upside, and is the underdog. I think it's always worth taking a look at. Stoltzfus backs up against the wall. I know he's 0-3 in the UFC. It's probably the last fight on his contract, and you know, if he loses, he's out, man. But it's 100% the easiest fight on his UFC tenure so far. The guy debuts against Kyle Daukaus, who's a fringe top 20 middleweight. And then you proceed to get matched up with Rodolfo Vieira and Gerald Meerschaert, who were two of the most dangerous submission artists in the division. And Dustin looked good. Now, you can argue he's up 2-0 in both of those, maybe 1-1. But he just makes one momentary lapse, you know, of judgment. And those are the submission type of people that you just can't make one little mistake, or they're going to, you know, they're going to catch you, man. And I just don't think you're going to have to worry about anything like that coming from Dwight Grant here, who I think is the inferior grappler by a mile. I think he has very much potential to just grind Dwight Grant up against the cage, take a bunch of minutes off of him, mix in these takedowns. And then on the feet, you know, Dwight Grant has a bunch of power, but there's little to no substance behind it. It's home run shot every time, very low volume. One fight in the UFC where this guy's eclipsed 50 significant strikes, and 4 of his 7 UFC fights have went to split decision. You always want to be holding the plus money ticket there, and very rarely does this guy ever cover his price tag. He's 37, lost 3 of his last 4. Should have lost the Stefan Sekulic fight as well. He's TKO'd in 2 of them, man. One of them just 3 months ago to Sergey Kendozko, and moving up weight classes, searching for answers here. You're getting a great price tag on Dustin Stoltzfus.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you. I see this as both guys. They're fighting for their job, right? It's interesting to see Dwight Grant make this move up, and you know, usually that doesn't fare well. He does have the body style that 185 probably should have been his weight class all along. But with the wrestling upside of Stoltzfus, I do think that Dwight Grant's going to probably struggle strength-wise with keeping this fight, or keeping his back off the cage or off the mat. So yeah, Stoltzfus at plus money I do think will be the side. For my prop of the night, I will be taking Lemos inside the distance. There is one book out there holding a plus 240. It's yet to drop on any of the books that we use, but I do think that she's got a ton of upside, especially inside the distance. You're getting a minus 350 favorite to win inside the distance at plus money. I think that that's her most likely path to victory, and I don't think that Michelle Waterson's going to have the willpower to stick through the tough moments that she's going to have to endure early in this fight. So give me Lemos inside the distance from a prop.
Yeah, you talked about it, man. She lands that big teep kick to the face in round 1. That 37-year-old ain't toughing it out. She's going to wilt. I dig it. For my prop, I'm going to go Jack Shore, scorecards, no action. Shore finish only, sitting around minus 190. Meaning the bet is voided if it hits the scorecards here, and I think you have a good chance of hitting your bet, and at worst, I think you're going to get your wager back. I think he's the superior striker of the two. We talked about Ricky being finished by a 40-year-old in Uriah Faber, but also in Jack Shore's recent fight with Timur Valiev, definitely looked like the striking was improving. And then when it comes to submission grappling, I think that favors Jack Shore as well. He's got the better jiu-jitsu, and while Ricky, I think, is a better wrestler, Jack can make this tricky by, threatening from submissions and things out of his guard. Ricky's got to make sure not to leave his neck out. And so if someone has a finishing upside, I do think it's Jack here. He finished his first 13 fights inside the distance before going to the decision in his last 3. So I don't like his ability to win minutes against a high-paced wrestler like Ricky. And so if it does go to decision, I think there's a good chance Ricky wins that one, or it's a greaseball Shore decision that I don't want any type of action on. So Shore finish only minus 190. I think it's a very good prop.
For my best bet of the night, I'm going back to Yair Rodriguez. I actually think that he should be the slight favorite here. I think that in the big octagon, with Brian's lack of wrestling ability, I think that this fight is going to take place primarily on the feet. I think that Ortega's way too hittable. He's kind of fallen in love with that striking a little bit. And Yair's going to be able to just kind of dance around, hit him with some big shots, win those moments in the round, and will win in the eyes of the judges, and possibly even KO Ortega, who's taken too much damage for 31-year-old.
You look like a genius giving out a plus money best bet on Saturday here, but I dig it, dude. Going to stay in the exact same fight here. For my best bet, I'm going to go Ortega versus Yair over 2.5 rounds. Got it at minus 192. Really, the only thing that scares me here is the Ortega submission. I think outside of that finishing sequence, I think the fight has potential to hit the scorecards at a very, very high clip. Ortega, the last 2 have gone the full 25 minutes, and the fight prior, with Max, was stopped in the 4th round. The dude's tough, durable, and has hit that over 2.5 numerous times. You look back at his 3rd round finishes, they were over the 2.5 round mark as well. Some confidence there. Like I said, his durability has been on display. And majority of his losses, man, I think they're going to come by decision. For Yair, much more talented on the feet. You talked about the big cage and the footwork to be able to avoid a whole lot of that wrestling. And also, maybe see him a bit more concerned about throwing kicks to give up that takedown as well. But I think Yair is just as tricky of a puzzle to solve for Brian. And early on in this fight, Brian's not going to be able to get on that bike and be forward pressure because Yair is so tricky. So I think round 1 could be a little bit of a slow round where people are, just trying to get their reads. And I know you brought it up a couple weeks ago. Featherweight 5-rounders hit the over so many times. Max and Volk every time. Cater and Giga, Cater and Emmett both over. And then I look at all the up-and-coming contenders like Arnold Allen, Bryce, Mobsar. It's all scorecard guys. The featherweight division right now really seems to be hitting the decisions a whole lot. I personally capped that over 2.5 rounds at like minus 235, minus 250, man. So to get minus 192 that this sees just into the 3rd round, really like that.
Now for our quick pick section. We start off the night with Jessica Panay and Emily Ducote. I always love to fade Panay, and I think that Ducote does have a style that she could beat her. It is kind of a toss-up fight, but I'm going to go with Ducote here.
Yeah, I think it's an easy pass. We can agree, but I think I'm going to go Emily Ducote as well. Next up, 185-pound weight class, Dwight Grant moving up to take on Dustin Stoltzfus. My dog of the week, man. Give me Dustin Stoltzfus.
Yeah, I think I'll tell you here. Looking at the fight more, I do think that Stoltzfus's style kind of shores up that he should get the nod here. Moving on, we have Jacoby versus Dawoon Jung. I know this is one that we're split on. I'm going with Dustin Jacoby, just waiting for that line to drop a little more.
Yeah, I got Dawoon Jung, 0.75 units here, one of my underdogs this week. 45, Bill Algeo taking on Herbert Burns. Both of them lost their opponents, now being matched up. Herbert Burns is a wild card coming off this 2-year layoff, but Bill Algeo always gives up grappling positions to Spark Carlisle, fucking Ricardo Ramos, all kind of guys, man. And Burns is legit on the mat, so Need to do my due diligence on the fight, but that could potentially be another live underdog in Herbert Burns.
So I'm gonna go with Bill Algeo here. I think that this is we've said it a couple of times. I think we might be split on quite a few of these because there's cases for every underdog here. I'm gonna go with Bill Algeo, the favorite this time though. Moving on in the next fight, Ricky Simone versus Jack Shore. Another underdog that I'm on, Ricky Simone here.
I don't have any action on it, so I'm gonna take my boy in Jack Shore. Triangle choke, second round. Punahele versus Dalcha. Man, I'm not laying juice on Punahele, but I think he's a little bit more polished, a little bit younger, more athletic. I'm gonna take Punahele.
I've seen a couple people saying that Punahele was their lock of the night for this card, and I think that that's all you need to hear to know what this card's about. I actually like Dalcha Lugiambula here. He hasn't looked great in his last few performances, but I do think that he has great power, and Puna's going to be there to hit. So I lean Dalcha here. Moving on to the Lauren Murphy versus Misha Tate fight. I'm going to take Lauren Murphy here, another dog.
I'm going to take Misha Tate here. Moving on, 45. We got Shane Burgos versus Charles Jourdain. Potential to be absolute fight of the night here. I like Shane Burgos, man. I think he's just going to look like a different animal compared to Charles. So much bigger, so much stronger. I like him to take this one.
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with you. I don't like his price tag, but I do think that he's gonna win this the majority of the time. Moving on, a fight that maybe we should have talked about a little bit more. It's crazy that it got skipped over. Matt Schnell versus Sumu Darji. We're big on Sumu Darji, just like we kind of just like him as fans. This seems like a favorable matchup. Schnell has a ton of power though, and Mudarji takes a little bit more damage than I like for him to. But he's so fast and crisp. I like Mudarji here to get the win.
Yeah, and then you also got to figure out Sumu Darji out there getting choked out by Luis Smolka and stuff. Matt Schnell's got a pretty decent ground game as well, but I think he's super chinny and gets in those firefights where that length that's going to cause him issues. I wished it was flyweight plus money for an under, but I think that fight actually sees a finish in it. Moving on.
Who do you got?
Oh, Sue.
Okay.
Jing Liang versus Muslim Salikov. I'm going to dig into this one some more after this because I think there is another live underdog in Ji Liang. Muslim at 38 fade material to me, man.
Yeah, we're looking at this one the same as well. I think the Leech actually has a pretty good shot here, so I'll pick him. Moving on to Michelle Waterson versus Amanda Lemos. I think that this is a setup fight for Lemos and a bad fight to accept on Michelle Waterson's part. I've got Lemos by finish.
Yeah, as durable as Michelle Waterson's been throughout the past, she ain't ever fought anybody with this kind of power, man. And she's going to be so tentative to get in there. I'm going to go Amanda Lemos as well. Main event, Brian Ortega versus Yair Rodriguez. I don't have a bet on the fight. Money line wise, I think it goes over 2.5. But man, the value is absolutely on Yair Rodriguez, underdog, second main event in a row.
Heck yeah, I'm all over Yair Rodriguez, and I think that, like you said, it's a fight that probably will see the judges. I just think that he's going to get the nod.
Yeah, man. Weigh-ins on Friday. Main card starts at 11. No, prelims start at 11 Eastern, so it's an early card on Saturday. 12 fights on the books, and hope there's a ton of finishes with a live crowd. See you guys next week.
Peace.